Here we are, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, to this day a game that remains one of my favourite Pokemon games of all time. It's a game with such heart, such a grand tale to tell, so big in fact that I couldn't possibly cover it alone, which is why between this video and the last one, I actually made a friend. Yes, I know that's kind of hard to believe, but anyway, please introduce yourself, good sir.
How's it going, everyone? I am Trey, or TCSGaming as some of you may know me. I'm really excited to talk about this game, especially thanks to the treatment it got from critics. A 4.9 out of 10? Really? I mean, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts got an 8.3 out of 10 for God's sake. Where's the logic in that?
I don't know, I actually kind of like that game. Sort of.
I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah, best save that discussion for another day.
Despite being frowned upon in the eyes of most critics, the game still sold relatively well. It's even gotten a Wii U Virtual Console re-release not too long ago.
That's not really saying much though, is it? I mean, the president of the Pokemon company could quite literally shit in a bag, slap some branding on it, and people will still buy it anyway, because hey, it's Pokemon. I would.
They do. That's called the anime.
All joking aside, however, it seems this game has garnered somewhat of a cult status, being heavily regarded by fans as not just a great Pokemon game, but a great game in general. I don't usually bring up critical reception in these reviews because in most cases it means fuck all to me. However, with this game, it's a little bit different. As much as I adore the main series games, their biggest problem is that they tend to overshadow some very creative spin-off titles, coupled with the review scores, and it makes it really hard to explain to people exactly why they should give these games a shot. That's why, together with my pal TCSGaming, we're going to express our full thoughts and give this game the review it desperately and oh so rightfully deserves. With all that out the way, let's do this thing. This is our review of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Time, Darkness, and Sky.
The game begins in a similar fashion to the first. You'll be asked a bunch of different questions and the player Pokemon you get will be determined by how you answer them. Since this game was released around the time of Diamond and Pearl, we now have the additions of the Generation 4 starters.
One thing that I probably should have gone over at the start of the video is that, much like the first game, Explorers of Sky was also accompanied by two sister versions, that being Explorers of Time and Explorers of Darkness respectively. Most of the differences usually come down to exclusive Pokemon, however Explorers of Sky adds a few more bells and whistles that we will discuss in due time. One of these features includes new playable Pokemon, including Vulpix, Vampy, Riolu, and Shinx. Munchlax and Meowth were omitted from Time and Darkness.
Just like last time, you can choose your partner Pokemon and call him or her anything you want.
Last time I called my partner Bob because I have no fucking friends, but this time I do, so I'll be naming him accordingly. Also, I'm a Cyndaquil because hooray for consistency. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to witness is the very first JGZ self-insert fanfiction, and let's face it, probably the last, because who would want to write fanfiction about this dickhead?
I don't know, I mean, if Club Penguin fanfiction's a thing, then anything is really possible.
Ah yes, never forgetty, rest in spaghetti. Also, don't ask me why I wrote that.
Okay, well anyway, this game's opening, while similar to the first, has a few distinct differences. You'll hear a voice of someone telling you to hold on, but we're not quite sure who's actually talking. You then see your partner in front of a strange-looking building with Wigglytuff's face on it. Looks pretty creepy if you stare at it for too long.
At least it's not the Gen 1 variation of Wigglytuff. Jesus Christ, those soul-piercing eyes!
After stepping on a wooden grate, your partner gets startled by some Pokemon who appear to be identifying his footprints to let him inside.
We then catch our first glimpse at the mysterious fragment, and just so you know, this little MacGuffin is going to be very important to the plot later on. Your partner then strolls down to the beach where he sees an impressive bubble display provided by some Krabby. Right on cue, both the player and partner Pokemon meet face to face, and already you're making fun of my goddamn name. I mean, I'd expect that from somebody like Bob, but you, Trey, come on.
Well, your name might be a bit weird, but Look on the bright side, at least you have several other redeeming qualities.
Like...
You make good videos.
Good one.
A coughing and Zubat then ambush the two of you and take this mysterious stone which your partner calls his special treasure.
You head into Beach Cave and promptly kick them to the curb to get the stone back. The newly befriended Pokemon then asks you to form an exploration team.
The reason why your partner wants to form an exploration team is because they want to find out where exactly this fragment came from and more importantly what it does. This is great because right away the game establishes that your partner has a reason for forming a team. They have an ambition that they are going to see through to the end. While the opening of the first game wasn't bad by any means, the fact that the heroes just decided to form a rescue team after one successful mission felt a little bit out of the blue. Here we're given an end goal, but we're not quite sure what that is or how to get it, already the game adding some mystery to the story.
After that, the two head back to what is known as Wigglytuff Guild, a place where young, aspiring explorers come to hone their skills in the hopes of one day making an actual discovery.
Upon entering the guild, you'll be greeted by Chatot, who will show you to Grandmaster Wigglytuff's room, and let me just say, he's quite the character as you'll see. Wigglytuff will then hand you an Explorer Kit along with some extra goodies to kickstart your adventure.
The game will then ask you to come up with a team name. Alright bud, what should our unstoppable force for team be called?
Team Sanic.
Why Team Sanic?
Because we're Sanic heroes.
Can't argue with that, 10 out of 10, perfect reasoning.
Gradually, you'll be introduced to some of the other guild members, such as Loudred, who wakes you up every morning being about 10% louder than the average 10-year-old on Xbox Live, and Bidoof, a trainee who joined not long before you did and lacks a lot of self-confidence. Those are just some of the most notable examples so far, but there are plenty of other guild members to get to know.
Indeed, right away Explorers of Sky establishes a cast of colourful, competent and quirky side characters. Not that I disliked any of the side characters from the first game, I thought Xatu was pretty cool, and Alakazam was alright, but in terms of memorability, there really is no contest here. One detail that I rather enjoy is that in one of the guild rooms you'll find a diary. Said diary belongs to some Flora. You'll get to read what goes on in this Pokemon's life, and occasionally you'll get to read their take on story events. I always love it when games do this. The guild not only has a sense of routine and structure, but also community too. Diglett, for example, mans the sentry duty and identifies the footprints of visiting Pokemon. Dugtrio goes back and forth between bulletin boards, making sure each and every single job is posted and up to date. Chimecho helps manage your teammates as well as make dinner. Even if we don't see it, small details like this allow us to think that every single Pokemon is doing their part to make the guild what it is, and we as a player are merely just a small part of it. Compare this to the first game where half the time you're covering everybody's asses. I mean, I know it's called Rescue Team for a reason, but as a result, most of the side characters didn't really have a chance to establish themselves due to the focus being primarily on the player. I'm also a really big fan of Chatot, the character that is, not the Pokemon. Half the time he plays the straight man to what is essentially a world full of loonies. When partnered with Wigglytuff, this can make for pure comedic gold. We'll have time to talk about the characters in greater detail later in this video. Trust me, we'd be doing this game a massive disservice if we didn't. For now though, let's focus on how the adventure unfolds.
To start your training, Chatot will send you on a very simple mission. Retrieve a pearl for Spoink in the Trenched Bluff. This first proper dungeon mainly serves as a way for the player to get their feet wet before taking on greater endeavors. I would also like to point out that this part of the game has one of the biggest troll moments in any Pokemon game. Spoink gives you a rather large sum of cash, so you're probably thinking, fuck yeah! Well, as it turns out, the majority of the money you earn from missions goes directly to the guild, meaning that if a mission promises a 2,000 Poke reward, then you will only receive 10% of that, giving you a measly 200 Poke. I get why they did this, because it would most definitely break the game, but it's still a dick-headed fake-out. You truly feel your partner's frustration at this moment. Oh well, if it gives us a roof to cover our head, then it'll have to do.
The main game is split up into 20 chapters. Chapter 3 being where the game really starts to pick up and never comes back down. The chapter starts with the player being guided by Bidoof around the town square. Eventually you'll end up meeting Azurill and Marill. They come to buy some apples at the Kekleon market. Azrael ends up dropping one of the apples, causing the player, being the dashing gentleman that I am, to pick it up and give it back to them.
Upon doing that, however, the player starts to feel lightheaded. Suddenly everything goes black and you're left with nothing, with the exception as what the player perceives to be a cry for help. Not just any cry for help, but Azrael's cry for help. Your partner, on the other hand, can't hear anything, which only adds even more mystery as to what this could all mean. Not too long after, you meet the brothers again talking to a Drowsy. We learn that they are actually on the lookout for a special item that has been lost for some time now, an Azrael float. Drowsy has offered to help them look for seemingly no reason whatsoever, which all just sounds a bit odd.
Sure enough, your suspicions of this mysterious Pokemon begin to rise when the player comes into direct contact with this shady individual. We get yet another Dizzy spell in which we see Drowsy threatening Azrael. You try convincing your partner of what you saw, but he finds it hard to believe given that the stranger was so selfless before.
You meet back up with Bidoof, who shows you the Outlaw Bulletin board. The board then updates fast and you can say plot twist, as it turns out the Drowsy was an outlaw, which is a big oh shit moment on the part of the player. The minute your partner starts shaking, you know exactly what's gone down. Drowsy was actually after some treasure that it's said to be hiding behind a small hole that he can't get through. One of the reasons why I think this scene works so well is not just the build up to this revelation, but also the Pokemon they decided would act as the villain in this scenario. The obvious example is the hypnotic pulling the strings motif that Drowsy is best known for. However, Drowsy, and by extension Hypno, have always been fairly creepy Pokemon. There was this one part in Fire Red and Leaf Green involving a little girl in a Hypno and Berry forest, and the Pokedex hasn't been too kind to it either. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire states that if your nose starts itching while you sleep, there's probably a Drowsy next to you trying to eat your dreams through your nostrils. Drowsy has a history of scaring kids.
Just before things get rough, you and your partner show up to put Drowsy in his place. Your partner is clearly scared shitless by this upcoming conflict, but he finds it within himself to push on. Not just for Azrael's sake, but for his sake as well. One healthy helping of smokescreens and embers later, and Drowsy has been put in his place. He is then taken in by the Magnezone squad. That is fucking awesome. Magnezone is quite literally RoboCop.
This first Outlaw mission is the start of the constant progress of your partner's character. The courage boost he gets during the Drowsy fight, while small, is a great indication of things to come. Case in point, days later, Chatot tasks you to go to a waterfall as he seems to think there's a secret behind it. You try touching it, but that goes about as well as you'd expect. As if by magic, another Dizzy spell occurs, depicting a very familiar silhouette charging headfirst into the waterfall and emerging next to a cave entrance on the other side. Your partner is hesitant to do this, and who wouldn't be? Sure enough, he takes a deep breath and decides to put his faith in you. On the count of 3, the two of you charge inside and make it through in one piece.
Continuing further into a waterfall cave, the team finds a treasure trove of gems. You try to move it, but to no avail. With yet another hangover, we learn that the gem was actually supposed to be a trigger for a flood-inducing trap, which your partner activates before you get a chance to warn him. Oops. When you wake up, you find yourself in a hot spring where you're greeted by Torkoal, the village elder. Well, you and your partner get to bathe in the hot springs, your teammates, fuck 'em.
When you report this discovery to Chatot, he is overjoyed, even disregarding the fact that you couldn't bring back the gem. We are about to get all the credit, but then Jack just has to butt in and quiz Chatot about whether Wigglytuff has been there before. Turns out he has. Way to ruin the sense of accomplishment, you buzzkill.
Well, modesty is my middle name.
Right, you just keep telling yourself that.
Discovery or not, the first exploration was great at showcasing the ever-growing bond between the player and their partner, and how said relationship will help to develop the latter character.
Later that night, we see a vision of a Pokemon. Players will recognize said Pokemon Gravile, who's after something called a Time Gear. We're given no further context as to what exactly a Time Gear is. Instead, the game uses this brief glimpse at an upcoming story thread to keep us hooked, and from there, the game's only going to gain more momentum.
Until the next morning, that is, where Chatot explains that a time gear located in Tree Shroud Forest has been stolen. This injects a great deal of panic into your guildmates, and there's a good reason for that.
There are 5 Time Gears in all, and they're all hidden in esoteric locations, like inside a volcano, or in this case, inside a forest. When a Time Gear is taken away, the flow of time in that area it protects completely stops. The wind doesn't blow, there's not a sound to be heard, and everything just looks cold and dead. Yes, granted, the identity of the culprit is pretty much ruined if you're a Pokemon fan, however, this is less about who did it and more about why they are doing it. What reason would this Gravile have for wanting to remove the Time Gears? The answer may surprise you. The next chapter has Wigglytuff announced that the guild is going on a big exploration. Guild members will be selected by their performance on missions and their progress in general. So as you would expect, it's back to the daily grind until the Zubat and Koffing from the start of the game show up in the guild. As it turns out, these two are actually part of a trio, with their leader being Skuntank.
Holy shit, did this game just predict the future?
I guess what people are saying is coming true. Game Freak really are running out of ideas.
Your partner tries to stand up to them, but ends up just moving aside. A few days later and you find out that Wigglytuff's supply of perfect apples has been completely diminished, and the game makes it absolutely clear exactly who did it.
Chatot tasks you to go to Apple Forest to find a special tree where these special apples are said to grow. Not exactly sure what makes them perfect, but whatever. Reaching the center of the forest is easy enough, but guess who's there to ambush? Team Skull used knockout gas in order to get away with the perfect apples. To add insult to injury, the fuckers give them to Wigglytuff, making us go without dinner as a result. Though it's probably for the better, seeing as how Wigglytuff was about to wreck the place. While these assholes can be assholes, they also aid in the growth of the partner character. A very subtle detail is the first time you butt heads with Team Skull. The player character gets knocked out, forcing your partner out of his comfort zone. In this situation, he just stands aside. However, in Apple Woods, when you are active, your partner suddenly becomes much more willing to take them on. This, and the exploration in the Waterfall Cave, not only tells us that your partner is more confident when he's with you, but to a certain extent he practically relies on you.
The next morning, the two of you get back to work on an empty stomach. Putting the cherry on top of the shit sundae, Chatot tells you that you might as well give up on your chances for getting chosen for the big guild exploration, given our previous failures, which wasn't actually our fault, you fucking assholes.
Who is he? He's an asshole, sir.
Before you head out, your guild mates call you over to give you some of their leftovers from yesterday's dinner. As it turns out, they felt bad for you, so they set aside some of their meal to give it to you. Again, it feels like a community where everyone has each other's back. Not gonna lie, it's little things like this that actually make me really care about these guys. Yes, granted, some of the characters did help to reconstruct your team base, but that was to repay you back for your services earlier in the game. In comparison, I've pretty much done fuck all for these guys, yet they've still reached out to lend me a hand. This is yet another shining example of the improved supporting cast.
Several side missions later, and Guildmaster Wigglytuff is ready to announce the members who will be going on this grand exploration. Turns out Wigglytuff has invited everyone along for the ride.
Except for Krogunk.
Yeah, but who gives a fuck about Krogunk?
True. As soon as you're ready, the whole gang sets out in hopes of finding the mystery surrounding the foggy forest. Each member gets put into groups. We get partnered with Bidoof. Interesting to note is that the player actually points out that their partner is taking charge a lot more. They plan out the routes, they manage the rest breaks, and they even keep track of time to make sure they're on schedule. This is further evidence to support that your partner really comes into his own when he's in the presence of others. In other words,
The real superpower of teamwork!
Really, dude?
what? We're Team Sonic, it fits.
Once you meet back up with the rest of the guild at the agreed campsite, you head further into the forest. On the way, you find a mysterious red gem that feels warm.
Soon enough, you find the stone's point of origin, a Groudon statue. Like before, when the main character comes into contact with it, he gets yet another exposition hangover.
This new piece of exposition is just as vague. It has someone congratulate you on solving some sort of puzzle. The player character makes it clear that it is a voice that he doesn't recognize, so by that notion, it can't be your partner. We know from the Drowsy vision and Wigglytuff's vision back at Waterfall Cave that they can relate to events from the past or future. We have more evidence to believe the former because when your partner steps foot into the forest, they get the feeling that they've been there before, so naturally you'd expect that last vision to come from the past. If that's the case, then how did the player get here? So many questions that keep you playing the game. Trust me, the rabbit hole goes much deeper. The twists and turns are only going to be more frequent from here on in.
At this point, it's safe to assume that this thing occurs when the player character touches something. What it does is still fairly vague, but we've experienced it enough to know how it's triggered. It's thanks to this message that you get the idea to put the stone in a hole in the middle of Groudon's chest, the heart if you will. Upon doing so, the fog surrounding the forest starts to clear, revealing the entrance to Fogbound Lake. Before you can tell your teammates, Team Skull, being the fuck nuggets that they are, decide to stop you and take all the glory. As a matter of fact, the only reason why they came on this expedition in the first place is because they saw a get-rich-quick scheme.
They're about to knock you out again when suddenly from out of the bushes rolls a perfect apple and Wigglytuff close behind it. The Guildmaster tells you to go on while he dances around with a perfect apple on his head. Team Skull tries to do the knockout gas trick again, only to be in for a pretty nasty surprise. When we next see them, they are lying on the ground completely out cold. Wigglytuff knocked their asses out. Wigglytuff's power is hinted throughout the entire game. Heck, Chowdat practically shits himself every time he comes close to crying. I think the thing I love about this scene isn't just Team Skull getting what they deserve, but also what the fuck did Wigglytuff do?
We don't get to see it, and it's probably best that it stays that way. Ugh.
At the end of the dungeon, you hear an incredibly loud roar, which turns out to be the legendary Pokemon, Groudon. The build-up to this battle is actually really well handled. For a while, all you can hear is the footsteps as they violently shake the earth. Accompanying the scene is your guildmates describing what kind of monster you're about to face. That's when Groudon decides to show itself.
As a kid, this scared the fucking shit out of me. Not because this scene is particularly scary, but because Groudon took me forever to beat in the last game, and this part gave me post-traumatic stress disorder. As it turns out, the Groudon statue acted as more of a defense mechanism. While not directly stated, I'm under the impression that the red gem was put there on purpose so that should anyone ever reach Fogbound Lake, Groudon would be ready and waiting for them. Groudon was actually protecting the Lake Guardian Uxie and by extension the Time Gear situated at the bottom of the lake.
A nice detail is that Uxie, along with the other Lake Guardians as we'll see later, actually guard lakes, much like they do in the Sinnoh games. It's a small detail, but it's a good acknowledgement of the lore. What follows is a really beautiful sight of Volbeat and Illumise glowing as they circle the lake fountain. It may seem a little bit weird for a DS game, but this really is a sight to behold. It's a perfect capping off of the journey you took to get here. This is your discovery, one that you fought for.
Indeed. The next chapter introduces us to Dusknoir, who is somewhat of a celebrity around these parts. Everyone in the guild knows and loves him, but us on the other hand, we have no idea who the fuck he is. When you set out for another hard day of item grinding, you run into the Merrill brothers. They tell you that they found their special item. Problem is that it's in a rather dangerous place called Amp Plains. Being the kind-hearted souls that we are, we offered to get it for them. As it turns out, that was a terrible idea, as something has even gotten the great Dusknoir worried.
The reason is because during this time of year, Electrike and Manectric return home, and that is very bad for us. Or at least it would be if we weren't fucking awesome. With the item recovered, Dusknoir takes you to the beach. There you decide to ask about those dizzy spells you keep experiencing. After all, if anyone knows, it's got to be the great Dusknoir. He describes these hangovers as the Dimensional Scream, and goes on to say that this ability, as we theorized before, has the power to look into the past and future. It's activated when the hero touches whatever the game decides is important to the plot. Keep this in mind for later.
Things suddenly get weird after you tell Dusknoir your name. He smirks, albeit briefly, but it's still nonetheless creepy. The next morning you get told that the time gear from Fogbound Lake, as well as a second gear from an unspecified location, have been stolen. The good news, however, is that we are now aware of the identity of the thief, that being of course, Grovyle.
Not only do you all band together to take Grovyle down, but Dusknoir joins the hunt too. We all split into groups in an attempt to find the two remaining time gears. Our team ends up in the middle of the desert where we find nothing but quicksand. Suspicion rises and you decide to go back to see what else the desert has to offer. In a scene very similar to the one back at the waterfall cave, you convince your partner to stay strong and jump into the quicksand.
Surprise, surprise, there's a secret cave underneath all that sand. Going deeper leads you to the Lake Guardian Mesprit, who attacks you at first, but then cools off once they learn that you and Uxie are practically best buds.
Right at that moment, Grovyle shows up and kicks your ass due to fatigue from the battle with Mesprit. Like you'd expect, time begins to freeze and you have no choice but to flee.
It appears we're once again back to square one, that is until Bidoof tells us about the gemstone he found in Crystal Cave.
While just an ordinary gem, the hero decides to touch it to see if he can still activate the Dimensional Scream, and sure enough, it works.
The new vision shows us Azelf being beaten and supposedly having his time gear stolen by Grovile. The question is a big one. Is this from the past or from the future? Further accentuating this is the fact that this is the last remaining time gear. We either do it now or suffer the consequences.
The team wastes no time in heading over to the Crystal Cave in search of Azelf. Luckily, Azelf has a defense mechanism in the form of a crystal barrier. Your team tries to fight Grovile the best you can, but that ends up in the same exact outcome. It's here we get even more juxtaposition with your partner's behavior. Much like when you were being bullied by Team Skull, the hero gets knocked out and the partner is left to fend for himself, in which they freeze up. Compare this to just a chapter before where he willingly jumped into the quicksand. It's to showcase the bond between the characters, sure, but it also shows just how exposed he is when he isn't in good company.
Thankfully, Dusk Noir saves us in the nick of time. Days later you learn that Grovile got away. Prepare yourselves folks, because this is where the plot starts getting really heavy.
Dusknoir reveals that Grovile is a Pokemon from the future, a ruined future where time is stopped completely. By coming back in time, he hopes to cause something that Dusknoir calls the planet's paralysis much earlier than intended. He wants to do this by taking all 5 time gears. Once the planet becomes paralyzed, it cannot be restored.
You mean you can't just spray the grass with Paralyze Heal?
What? No.
Oh.
It doesn't stop there either, as it's revealed that Dusknoir is from the future too. He's come here to finally track down Grovile and bring him to justice.
Wait a minute, I thought that Dusk Noir was supposed to be a great hero. How the hell did he gain notoriety that quickly?
Well, the game doesn't say when the 2 Pokemon went back in time, so we can assume they've been at this for a while. Plus, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Fuck, if only the YouTube game was that simple. Dusk Noir then continues his search for Grovile. The plan is for him to have the Lake Trio ambush Grovile so that he has no chance of winning. Essentially, they're cock-blocking him.
Not too much longer after that, you learn that Dusknoir was indeed successful in his mission. Using a temporal wormhole, Dusknoir is going to head back home with Grovile. Before that, though, he has a few goodbyes to make.
It's at this point where the game decides to have a massive what the fuck moment on us. Dusk Noir's betrayal is not only significant for you, the player, but also your partner too.
The thing that is hard to comprehend about this scene is that his actions up until this point don't really add up. In addition, he was also introduced with the title of the Great Dusknoir. Right away, the game wants us to respect this guy. His betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere, and I'm not just talking about that smirk back on the beach. If you look at Dusknoir's platinum sprites, the chest part of his body appears to have something resembling an angry face. If you flip over to the back of the sprite, you'll see something that looks like a happy face. With this knowledge in mind, we believe that Dusknoir was deliberately chosen for the backstabber role because he's two-faced.
Plus, the fact that he's based off a Reaper makes him naturally creepy. When you wake up, you find yourself tied up on a pillar next to your partner and Grovile. Your partner is still in disbelief from Dusk Noir betraying them. He tries to talk him out of it, but Dusk Noir continues, setting us up for our execution.
The 3 of you band together and push back the horde of Sableye. With a combination of orbs and dig, you're able to stealth your way out of there. It's at this point where your partner becomes incredibly distraught. Dusknoir has betrayed us, we're trapped, with no way to get home, and the only person we can put our faith in at this point is Grovile. As to be expected, your partner isn't too keen on a guy who attempted to cause the planet's paralysis. And since time technically doesn't exist, the dimensional scream can't be used to fill in the blanks of this world. Topping that off is a music track that fits the mood perfectly. Not only is this song dark and foreboding, but it portrays a sense of hopelessness, a sentiment that is shared with your partner.
Actually, can we talk about that for a second? I love the ruined future and the impact that it has on the player. Up until now, the game has been very happy-go-lucky with lots of bright colours and peppy tunes. You were surrounded by a lot of people who had your back, you saw a lot of breathtaking locations, and life was generally pretty damn good. In comparison, the ruined future is not only lifeless, but emptier than my personality. It's kind of the same reason why I love the bad futures in Sonic CD. It's one thing to be told the world will plummet into chaos, but it's another thing actually showing it. Very few Pokemon remain in this timeline. The ones that have survived, such as Spiritomb, will not hesitate to attack you. Not because they're evil, but they've been driven to the point of insanity. The effect of the planet's paralysis has made their primal instincts take over. Makes you wonder what would happen if everything just stood still.
Even still, your partner holds his head up high, saying that if we stick together, then we will find a way back home no matter what. Keep in mind that at this point, we're not sure if there is a way back home. As far as we know, Dusknor is the only one that knows how to make these wormholes. Yet, out of belief in you, your partner has the strength to carry on. We also get to see our first glimpse at what we'll come to know as Primal Dialga, the master of Dusknor.
After saving him from Spiritomb, we catch up with Grovyle to figure out exactly what's going on. Grovyle explains that Dusknoir was the one pulling the strings the entire time, and that he was actually collecting the time gears for a very specific purpose. Dusknoir does in fact have a motive in all this, and it's not necessarily an evil one either. You'll know what that is when we get to it, but let's just say this conflict isn't exactly black and white.
Dude, just stop with that fucking pun.
First of all, that was unintentional. Second, what, too soon?
Your partner, even after hearing this, is still very reluctant to trust Grovyle, as he still can't get around the fact that Dusknor did what he did, eventually breaking down and just accepting the fact that he's a completely different person. The player character convinces him to put the past behind him and take a chance by trusting Grovyle. Grovyle then comes out and says that regardless of who we decide to believe, he will proceed with his mission, and he will fight us if we try to get in his way. Very admirable, especially when you learn the full truth.
Choosing to follow Grovyle, you eventually find yourself in a forest. A very familiar looking forest at that. In case you haven't caught on, this is the exact same forest from outside Frogbound Lake. This isn't very significant at the moment, but it will be.
Deep within this forest you find a Celebi, and a shiny one at that. Celebi and Grovyle have a pretty big history, to the point where it's implied that she has feelings for Grovyle. Celebi as a character is great, and a breath of fresh air from the depressing vibes this world gives off. It's really nice to see someone with a fun-loving sense of humor even when things seem at their darkest.
The player eventually finds an opening to which they can get back home, but like the old saying goes, what comes up must come back down. Dusknoir ends up cornering the group along with Primal Dialga. Because he's in play, Celebi can no longer use her time powers to their full potential.
Here, everyone just gives up, even Grovyle, who at this point practically has the entire world on his shoulders. Your partner turns to you for encouragement, but even the player has given up at this point. This is also where the player's name gets revealed to Celebi and Grovyle. You wouldn't think that's significant, but it is, trust me. The most notable thing about this scene is that even after Grovyle himself has given up, the faith that your partner has in you inspires everyone else to keep going.
If all this exposition wasn't enough, Grovyle has one more shocking revelation. He wasn't alone when he came to do this mission. He came with a partner. His partner's name, you ask? Jack. Or whatever the player's name is, but I'm the main character, so we're going with Jack, goddammit.
Anyway, with the new information, it fills in quite a lot of blanks in the story so far. That voice you heard, that was Grovyle. The fact that the wormhole sent you to the same place is more evidence to support this. Finally, you remember that dimensional screen vision we had in Fogbound Lake? That vision didn't actually take place in the past like we theorized. Instead, that vision is where you and Grovyle are in the exact same forest in the future.
Celebi uses her limited powers in order to transport us to the time portal. We leave Celebi behind, but she states no matter how hard she tries, Dusknoir will never catch her, and well, she isn't wrong.
The best part is that even taking time travel into account, this really isn't that hard to follow as long as you're paying the slightest bit of attention. I mean, if Jack can wrap his head around it, anyone can.
Exactly. Wait, what?
You get back to the present, past, whatever, fuck time travel.
I feel you, bud.
Since Grovyle's with you, going back to the guild is a no-no, so you rest in your partner's old home inside the Sharpedo Bluff.
The three of you sit around a fire discussing the current state of affairs. Your partner asks whether or not Grovyle will go back to steal a time gear again, with the answer being the same as last time. What we didn't know is that even if Grovyle removes the time gears, the flow of time will be stopped temporarily. Or should I say, temporarily? Ow!
You deserved that.
Yeah, you're right. But it was still worth it!
Grovyle states that he's collecting the time gears because Temporal Tower is about to collapse, and with it, the flow of time. In order to stop this, the 5 time gears must be placed at the summit before it's too late. The problem is that Temporal Tower is located in the Hidden Land, a place that is yet to be found. The plan has been laid out. We go to each of the specified locations, reclaim the time gear, and save the world.
Well, more like we collect one of them, which also happened to be the easiest one in Tree Shroud Forest. After this point, Grovyle decides that it would be faster for him to just do it on his own, and well, he's not exactly wrong. Instead, both of us go to the guild and put in a good word for him. While everyone refuses to believe that Dusk Noir is now on the side of evil and vice versa for Grovyle, it is the Guildmaster Wigglytuff who chooses to put his faith in us, subsequently swaying the rest of the guild along with him.
Your partner deduces that the key to the hidden land has something to do with the relic fragment. You decide to go ask the Grand Elder Torkoal, and he says we need some sort of proof in order to access the hidden land. It's at this point where Chatot and Wigglytuff suddenly remember a cave that they once explored in the past that happens to have a connection to the hidden land. Wigglytuff also gets in touch with Lapras, who will basically act as our transport to the hidden land. This is the only real problem I had with this plot. Why doesn't the player touch the fragment and use the dimensional scream in order to find out how to get to the hidden land? We know what it does and how it's activated. While it might not give all the details, it will at least give us a lead to go on.
I have to agree, I feel this part of the plot comes off as a little bit contrived. However, it does do a lot to develop the relationship between Wigglytuff and Chatot. You have to guide Chatot through Bryan Cave because he had a particularly bad incident not too long ago. At the end of the dungeon, you think you're in the clear, but in actuality, you're just being baited by fossil Pokemon. You would have been knocked out right then and there if it wasn't for Chatot taking the bullet for you. As it turns out, he wasn't the one being careless all those years ago. He got hurt last time because he was protecting Wigglytuff. While having history repeat itself may not be physically beneficial to Chatot, it does give us a better idea of the bond between these two Pokemon. Also, Team Skull stole our fragment and now they're giving it back.
Wait, they're still a thing? Honestly, the fact that these bullies are just a footnote at this point really shows just how far we've come. With that being said, we use the relic fragment, hop on Lapras, and swiftly swim through the Sea of Time. In case you're confused, Temporal Tower in the Hidden Land exists in its own pocket of time, which is why we can't see it normally. With the combination of the relic fragment and the Mirage Pokemon Lapras, you're able to cross the border, and the music here makes this scene absolutely mesmerizing.
You trek through the Hidden Land and find the Rainbow Stone Ship. By placing the fragment inside, it prepares for activation, but not before having to deal with Dusk Noir one last time. He appears to be down and out, but in reality, he was setting you up for a trap so he could push you back into the time portal. Grovyle sacrifices himself so that you can continue your mission, but there's more. Dusk Noir states that if we were to save Temporal Tower from its destruction, then due to the way time travel works, the Pokemon of the future will cease to exist, meaning that Grovyle, Celebi, Dusk Noir, and yes, you will eventually disappear. I love this attempt to humanize Dusk Noir here. Yes, what he's doing is still selfish, but the fact of the matter is that he's doing it to protect his own existence, and that is certainly understandable. As mentioned with Spiritomb, it's feeding into that primal dog-eat-dog instincts induced by the messed up future.
Grovyle's final words also sting. Your partner comes back just in time to see Grovyle enter the time portal. Grovyle asks the partner to take care of you, and says to the player that even though it might be hard, you're going to inevitably say goodbye. He's not talking about him, he's talking about your partner. Topping this scene off is a brilliantly timed song that not only conveys the sadness of saying goodbye to Grovyle, but also the lingering thought that you're going to have to do the same with your partner. What's worse is that when you do, you know he'll be completely crushed.
Leaving Grovar behind, the two of you head up to Temporal Tower using the Rainbow Stone ship. Time's ticking. The world is counting on you.
Reaching the summit will put you face to face with Primal Dialga. Again, the music here is absolutely glorious. It gives you the energy you need to make one last final push, ending on a somber note as a reminder that after this battle is over, so too will your adventures.
Dialga is defeated and you put the time gears in place at the very last second. Dialga thanks you for your help and the two of you head back to the Rainbow Stone ship. And then it starts to happen.
As you're walking down the long pathway back to your transport, you begin to disappear. The player character explains to the partner that since the future has changed, he no longer exists in this world. Despite fully knowing his fate, the player states that even after I disappear from here, I will never forget you. The partner wonders why the player didn't tell them this before, because remember, the partner wasn't there when you were talking to Grovyle. This was done on purpose, not only to stop the partner from having second thoughts about saving the world, see Dustnor as an example, but also to let that thought of saying goodbye linger in your head. You think you're ready, even after countless playthroughs, but trust me when I say you will never be ready for this ending. Watching your partner slowly walk home with the knowledge that he's not only getting further away from the tower, he's getting further away from you.
Now, I mentioned last time that on a surface level, one could call this a direct copy of the first game's ending. I also mentioned that I don't agree with this statement. Not only does watching your partner slowly walk back home pull on my heartstrings much harder, but it's what comes after that was the final blow for me. Yes, the first game's ending was sad, but because the conflict was resolved immediately after the credits, it lost a lot of its impact. Granted, the same could be applied here. However, what is different is that we get a time skip, meaning we get to see the true effect your disappearance has on the world, and more importantly, your partner. Everything seems fine until your partner heads down to the beach where he sees Krabby shooting bubbles over the sea. This scene is both beautiful and tragic. Why? It's quite simple. This is how you and your partner first met. Your partner breaks down and starts remembering all the time you spent together.
Along with the beautiful song titled Don't Ever Forget, gives this game the proud honor of being one of the only pieces of media to make me cry.
I said it once, and I will say it again. This ending, man. This fucking ending. What makes this more upsetting compared to your partner in the first game is that in Red Rescue Team, you got the feeling that even if you weren't there, your partner would do just as well without you. Hell, he was the one who got you a house. He was the one calling the shots most of the time. Heck, he even stood up to Gengar. Looking back at all these memories, however, you begin to realise that your partner got where he is because you were there to push him along. He always had that strength, but he needed somebody to help him bring it out. That person was you. Even when things are at their worst, he never, ever lost faith in you. The game leaves you with an image of Bidoof comforting your partner as he becomes totally and utterly emotionally destroyed. Coming back to this game, I promised myself that I wasn't gonna cry. It had been at least 5 years since I played this game, and I thought to myself, well, surely I'd have grown up since then. For a while, I resisted emotional blow after emotional blow, from Groval's sacrifice to the return home. I held on. But then, after seeing that montage and realising just how much you meant to your partner, the game finally got me. I don't just mean I shed a tear. No, I mean I flat out wept at this part. Even writing this section of the script had me in tears. I have never, ever been so emotionally impacted by a piece of media before. This scene to me belongs up there with moments such as Aerith's death from Final Fantasy VII. Oh, but Jack, don't be silly, it's a Pokemon game. So what? The game doesn't care. It goes out there and tells the story it wants to, regardless of its childish appearance. And I tell you what, it does a lot better than you'd think. You may laugh, you may mock me, but I fucking dare you. Play this game for yourself and tell me that with a straight face. To date, this is the only video game to make me cry. I realise I've been a bit music heavy these past few minutes, but my god, it adds so much more to what is already a pretty upsetting turn of events. By far a contender for one of, if not the best DS soundtrack, or even the whole Pokemon series. I'll say it again, and I mean it tenfold this time. If you're still not satisfied with the story of the main RPG series, I give you my full encouragement to play this game. Appearance or brand name should never dictate the quality of a story. Anime, take some fucking notes.
Say, weren't you going to make a video on that?
Shh, don't give them any ideas. Besides, would you like to go to a 1000 episode anime?
You know you're gonna end up doing it eventually.
Yeah, I know. Can never let anything go.
After the credits, to give thanks for saving the flow of time, Dialga decides to give your partner one last gift after seeing his sorrow. As if by magic, he brings you back from the Shadow Realm. The Shadow. As if by magic, he brings you back from the Shadow Realm, and all's right with the world. The end.
Or is it?
Wait, there's more?
Yes, indeed.
Well, that's news to me.
Not to worry, bud. I'll take the lead for a little while. The post-game is not as meaty as one might think, though it does go about filling some of the missing pieces from the post-game. But first, graduation exam!
Hang on, we just defeated the Grandmaster of Time himself, and we still barely qualify for a graduation exam? Fuck, you'd think they'd give us the diploma right then and there.
Yeah, but then we wouldn't be able to take on the Grandmaster of all things bad.
It's Wigglytuff, isn't it?
What? No! How could you possibly think? Yeah, it's Wigglytuff. But to give props to the game yet again, while they are about as subtle as a sledgehammer to the face, it makes up for that with a great sense of humour.
It's made even funnier by the fact that this Grandmaster is built up to be this really monstrous person, only to have Bidoof accidentally blow the guild's cover. Priceless. I can applaud the game for giving us a laugh, especially after the rather intense finale. Other than that part, this is all new to me.
You aren't missing out on much, honestly, but for the sake of the review, let's go over it briefly anyway. Lord knows we haven't praised this story enough for one video. The post-game is made up of several loosely connected plot threads. For example, in one mission you save an explorer known as Scizor to give you some really fucking hard dungeons. There's a story where you take care of a Manaphy. Essentially, much like you do in the Ranger games, you raise Manaphy straight from an egg. As you keep feeding it blue gummies, Manaphy will eventually learn how to speak until eventually departing into the deep blue sea. It reminds me a lot of the movie Pokemon Ranger Temple of the Sea, a movie I remember liking, but it's been a while so don't quote me on that. This scene isn't anywhere near as heart-wrenching as anything from the main story. They try and play up the whole emotional music thing, but that doesn't really work if we've only been with Manaphy for such a short time. Doubly so if you stocked up blue gummies like I did. Even if you don't, you're only required to get 2 blue gummies before Manaphy fucks off and leaves you, so even then it really doesn't work. Next you meet Team Charm. Fuck! They have some affiliation to Wigglytuff, though they don't get deep into that at all. At least, not in Explorers of Time and Darkness. More on that later. The real meat of the story happens when Azrael falls under the influence of a nightmare. Before this, your character was contacted by Cresselia, saying the distortion of time and space is expanding and will continue to do so if you continue to exist. With the help of the returning Drowsy, you enter Azrael's nightmare and meet Cresselia face to face. Cresselia tells you that you must be killed, otherwise the world will fall into a never-ending nightmare. As it turns out, your partner was contacted by the same Cresselia. Searching for more answers will eventually lead you in the direction of Lapras, who tells you of a being kind of like Dialga, who is said to rule over the fabric of space, Palkia. We learn that he lives in a place called Spatial Rift. The only issue is that we have no idea where it is or how to get there. Not to worry though, because upon turning in for the night, Palkia arrives at your doorstep to do the job himself, and oh god, this motherfucker's out for blood. Upon confronting him, he also falls under the influence of a nightmare. Much like before, entering this nightmare will have you be greeted by Cresselia, who's just about ready to chop your block off. Before that happens, however, we are saved by none other than Cresselia? As it turns out, the Pokemon that was behind all of this was none other than Darkrai. He invites you to the Dark Crater, where he reveals some rather shocking info. First of all, you remember at the beginning of the game when you got separated from Grovyle? That was really Darkrai's doing. The resulting attacks cause you to lose your memory and transform you into a Pokemon. Ah, but wait, there's more. The reason why he attacked you in the first place was because you were a hindrance in the destruction of Temporal Tower. In other words, the planet's paralysis and all the resulting heartbreak, that was the result of this slimy bastard. All for a sad attempt to drown the world into darkness. If that doesn't make you want to take this guy down, then I don't know what will. He tries to escape, but Palkia shows up just in the nick of time and attacks the time portal. Much like what happened to us, Darkrai's memory will be completely gone, so even if he does manage to escape, it will mean nothing in the long run.
I'd say that was pretty interesting.
It certainly does clear up a few loose ends, but even still, I wouldn't say it's a required playthrough. The main story is good enough on its own, and I really think you can get away with just playing that.
But wait, there's even more story content, this time exclusive to the Sky version. As you go along the main story, you'll unlock 5 special episodes to shed light on certain side characters.
Now, this is new to me because the version I grew up playing was Explorers of Darkness. I wanted to get Sky as a kid, but I never had the chance up until this review. That said, take it away, pal.
First episode is focused on Bidoof in a time before you joined the guild. We get shown a montage of Bidoof screwing up at almost every turn. Then one day, Chatot asks him to go check out what's in store at the market. We're then told that before he departed, his mother gave him some money for safekeeping. He then gets given an item by a Snover before running off. That item being a map to Star Cave, which gives Bidoof a newfound inspiration. Snover comes back and offers to take him to Star Cave, where the wish-granting Pokemon Jirachi is said to be sleeping. Bidoof then comes up with an excuse to sneak out of the guild and go on his first real exploration. Things take a turn for the worst, as Snover was actually manipulating Bidoof the whole time. The crooks are stopped in their tracks by the other guild members, and they are royally fucked. Bidoof does indeed end up finding Jirachi, with his wish being to have some new recruits to pass on what he's learned on his journey. By doing this, he learns that being the best explorer doesn't come from a simple wish, it comes from experience and the mistakes you make along the way. He wants to be accepted by his guildmates. It works because, as players of the main RPG series, we see a Bidoof and instantly think shit Pokemon. So to have the audience actually care and sympathize with Bidoof's goals is quite an accomplishment. The next side story focuses on Wigglytuff's childhood as an Igglybuff and how he ended up getting his hands on a Defend Globe. As a child, Igglybuff used to make friends with everyone, including a couple of bully Pokemon in the form of Banette and Skorupi. His parents were always worried that this had the potential to lead him into trouble. This is expanded upon when his father explains the time when he and Igglybuff were coming home from a storm. The father almost gets crushed by a boulder, but is saved through Igglybuff unleashing a mysterious surge of power. While out with the bullies, Igglybuff comes across the Pokemon Armaldo, who tries to scare him at first, but Igglybuff doesn't even flinch. Inviting him into the cave, Armaldo tells Igglybuff that he was once an explorer who used to search in dungeons for all sorts of valuable treasures. He shows Igglybuff a map which he's been trying to solve its secrets for years. Igglybuff then responds by burning it, noticing there's another layer underneath. With the map now lighting the way, the two set out on their first adventure. The episode's also pretty fucking funny at some points. Armaldo is busy surveying the room for some very obvious traps, and Igglybuff just proceeds to break the door down. Now that's one way to subvert expectations. When the two reach the end of the dungeon, they find a single chest with a Defend Globe inside, which increases the power of Bug-type moves. The successful mission then prompts Igglybuff to ask Armaldo if he can become his apprentice. While reluctant, he does agree to train Igglybuff. We get shown all of their successful missions until we see a Nidoking watching them. Said Nidoking goes back to his parents and says that not only has he been playing in a dangerous part of the forest, but that he is currently in danger. The reason why may come as a shock. Armaldo is actually an outlaw. He spread the rumor that there was a monster roaming in the forest so that no one would find him hiding in his cave. Despite this though, he does come quietly, much to Igglybuff's dismay, in yet another emotional scene. He tells Igglybuff to keep adventuring and to make him proud by becoming a great explorer. As a memento to remember him by, he gives him the Defend Globe, stating that once he has done his time, he'll eagerly await the day he explores with Igglybuff again. The fact that Wigglytuff actually takes care of the Defend Globe is telling as to how much it means to him. Moving on to the next episode, which focuses on Sunflora. This one has Sunflora being assigned a very important mission to apprehend an outlaw in the form of Haunter, who is said to be invincible. The majority of this episode is not so much developing Sunflora as a character, rather it delves into her relationship with her fellow guildmates, more specifically Loudred. Loudred turns up, going against the guild rules to assist Sunflora against Haunter, and again in the final confrontation. With their brain power combined, they are able to figure out that he's actually 3 Haunters. Every time one gets defeated, we get a flash of light, and that's when they switch places. Since Loudred broke the rules, he gets punished even though Sunflora would be burnt to a crisp without him. The base of the episode is trying to showcase Sunflora and Loudred's contrasting personalities. Yet it serves as a great example as to why the guild as a setting works so well. Every Pokemon may come in all shapes and sizes, but no matter what, they've got each other's backs. Episode 4 focuses on Team Charm, who were seen in the post-game. You play as Team Charm in their early days before they were writing A Life of Fame. They are stopped by a Blossom, telling them not to progress any further.
Looks like they've got a severe case of Ditto face.
Spoilers, dude! They come across another exploration team, AWD, standing for Arbok, Weavile, and Drapion.
What a stupid name.
I know, right? You'll never catch us with something that unoriginal.
No, of course not.
They appear to be after the same treasure as Team Charm, so we basically have to stop them. To add fuel to the fire, this Sentret tells us that these guys are actually bad Pokemon, as they allowed his friends to get hurt. Along their travels, the group will also come across Wigglytuff, who they quickly befriend with the help of a perfect apple. Wigglytuff actually helps them later on by solving the mystery of the looping cave. Granted, it was by complete fucking accident, but still. The end of said dungeon holds a treasure chest, but before they take it, they get into a fight with Team AWD. Wigglytuff breaks up the fight, saying that even though they might be bad ones in the conflict, there's no such thing as a bad Pokemon, as a link to Armaldo. He then reveals that the chest was actually a Ditto in disguise.
No, you don't fucking say. The subtlety is at Omega levels today.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Ditto explains that he disguised himself as a different Pokemon to force the teams to fight, in an attempt to protect the treasure. Essentially, he was hoping that the two teams would knock each other out. When you see what he was protecting, you will find out why this was so important. It is revealed that the treasure was none other than a time gear. This is interesting because it means that the only time gear we have yet to see is inside a volcano. After a successful expedition, the two teams go their separate ways. Before departing, Team Charm offered to give Wigglytuff a place in their team, which explains a lot of the implied history.
About that, if I could interject for a quick second here. This episode I kind of find, how should I say, counterproductive.
How do you figure?
The story tells us about how Team Charm became a success, but in order for the story to grip you from the start, you need to be interested in Team Charm to begin with. Now this isn't a problem if you played the special episodes in succession and after everything else like I did. That said, if you're doing it as they unlock, you might be slightly confused. The episodes unlock during the main game and Team Charm doesn't appear until the post game. I think it would have been better if this episode was unlocked at a later point so we can then dive deeper into the history between them and Wigglytuff. Anyway, rant over, back to you, bud.
The final episode might just be the best one of all. Scratch that, you play as Grovyle, which means it's instantly the best. The episode begins after Grovyle went back to the future with Dusknoir. Two are still badly injured, but even still, Grovyle wastes no time in getting to Temporal Tower to face Primal Dialga. He wants to buy the player character some time. Grovyle is then quickly cornered by Dusknoir and a group of Sableye. Much to his surprise, however, the Sableye start attacking Dusknoir as well as himself. After this, Grovyle and Dusknoir make a temporary truce. Two make their escape and end up interrogating a Sableye to find out just what the fuck is going on. Dusknoir is enraged to find out that not only has Primal Dialga found some new henchmen, he also has another secret agent which he's attempting to send to the past. They then trek through Temporal Tower, which is no joke, this is the same dungeon, just more lifeless. While not being much different, it is still cool to see. When the two of them reach the top, to their surprise, Dialga isn't there. With the knowledge that Dialga is trying to send his agent back to the past in order to stop the player character, the two deduce that he must be after Celebi to access the passage of time. Trouble is, when they get to the forest, she isn't there. Dusknoir then has the idea to use Porygon to teleport them to Frozen Island, formerly Blizzard Island. Grovyle almost gets wounded by an ice chunk, but is then shielded by Dusknoir. After having a little scuffle with the locals, the two of them find somewhere to hide. It's at this point where things get surprisingly real, almost existential. Dusknoir asks Grovyle what drives him to go on his missions, fully knowing that he will disappear should he complete it. Grovyle then responds by saying that at the end of the day, we're all going to disappear at some point. He goes on to say how long you live means nothing. It's all about what you do with the time you're given. Grovyle does what he does because he knows that even if it means giving up his own life, the sacrifices he makes will have a lasting effect on the world. Even when he's gone, he will never truly disappear because the memories of him, his spirit, will always reside in the Pokemon he fought to bring happiness.
Are we having a meaning of life discussion in a Pokemon game?
Yes we are. And the result is pulled up with so much dignity and respect for its audience. Pokemon X and Y kind of touched upon the themes of life and death, but my god, it is severely outmatched by this game. As they continue to move forward, eventually they find Celebi, who has been held captive by Spiritomb. While Grovyle tries to save Celebi, he's struck out by some purple thing, and the truth is finally revealed. Dusknoir had this planned out from the very beginning, and that by luring Grovyle here, he would evaporate his spirit until nothing but the body remains. He would then transfer his own spirit into Grovyle's body, meaning that yes, Grovyle was the new agent this entire time. Dusknoir would use his body to trick the player character and his partner into believing that their friend had come back, only to backstab them at the very end. Grovyle, however, is not ready to give up on Dusknoir just yet. He says that in his moment of weakness, the two came to a mutual understanding and that deep down, he knows that being a puppet to Dialga is wrong. He pleads with Dusknoir and the Sableye to fight back. Dusknoir is adamant that nothing will stand in his way when it comes to his hatred for Grovyle. It appears that actions speak louder than words, however, as Dusknoir comes to his senses and pushes Grovyle out of the way. Dialga takes note of this, and he is pissed like he is going fucking berserk on Dusknoir. Suddenly, an Aurora Borealis fills the sky, indicating that Grovyle that the player was successful in stopping the destruction of Temporal Tower. Grovyle, Dusknoir, and Celebi prepare for the final confrontation with Dialga as they slowly begin to fade away thanks to the changes in history. Dialga is defeated, and with that, the group prepare for the end. Before Dusknoir disappears, he asks Grovyle if his spirit was shining, with Grovyle saying that it's the brightest it's ever been. Grovyle then finds the strength to crawl over to Celebi, so that the two can watch the rising sun together one last time.
I'm not crying. Damn you, game, so glorious.
Thankfully, like the player character, everyone does indeed stay alive. Dialga explains that this wasn't his doing, but rather someone greater. I wonder who.
Can I just say, seeing Dialga restore the dead planet back to life is so heartwarming for somebody who only played Time in Darkness. I always wondered what happened to Grovyle when he went back to the future. As far as I was concerned, he was gone, so getting to see this resolved so many years later is such a joy for me.
Well, now that we've talked about the soul-crushing story, you ready to go to the gameplay?
Gameplay? Oh fuck right, yeah, there's gameplay. We've talked all this time about the story, and yet we haven't even talked about the game part of this game. Explorers of Sky retains that dungeon crawling playstyle you saw from the first game. Like before, you can get your jobs from the job bulletin board. However, as established in the story section of this review, which might as well take up the whole review, there is an outlaw bulletin board. This will have you apprehend some crooks, retrieve some stolen items, or even stumble upon the odd enemy hideout. These can be fun, but you need to be prepared, otherwise the Pokemon that you're chasing will either get away or he'll knock your candy ass out. The rewards you get will almost always be greater, so keep that in mind too.
Speaking of rewards, you can now have clients sometimes join your team or even give you eggs to hatch in Chansey's daycare. The recruitment system is much improved from the last game since you don't have to worry about finding the right friend area to build your team. Just ring the bell and Chimecho will sort it all out for you. Like the main series games, the changes here don't actually drastically change the way you play. Rather, there are just some small tweaks that act as conveniences. To start, whenever there's a weather effect such as sandstorm, the text will simply say that you've been damaged rather than taking the time to visually indicate the danger. It's faster and much less annoying. There are also some really cool new items here, the best of which is probably the Blinker Siege, which obscures the Pokemon's vision if eaten. Doesn't sound like much, but trust me, this can turn even the Lord of Time himself into a total chump.
Dungeons have also become much easier to traverse for a couple of reasons. For one, they are much shorter with more save breaks. The only 99 floor dungeons are the extra optional challenge dungeons, and that's the way it should be, goddammit. The other reason is that as you go along the game, your bag and storage will be upgraded, so you'll be able to plan more effectively without having a 20 item limit hampering you. That said, there are points where the game can get just as tedious. Like in the post game where you need to find blue gummies for Manaphy, or a better example, the expedition with Team Charm.
What did I miss out on exactly?
Not a goddamn thing, trust me, you'll be grateful that you did. To access each Reggie chamber, you have to loop around 3 floors, trying to spell out the words ice, rock and steel respectively. You do this by collecting unknown stones. You do that by defeating the corresponding unknown letters, in a game with random drops, with equally random encounters. Mother, I don't want to play this game anymore. It's not like you can just wait around for too long either, otherwise you'll just get blown away by the wind. No word of a lie, I spent 2 fucking hours in this one dungeon. It was so bad that I ended up spelling the steel letters before even finishing the rock chamber. Guys, I love this game, but trust me when I say that the post game is nothing special. Legendaries have become much easier to recruit. Instead of praying that they join your team or forcing you to go through 99 floor dungeons twice, Mewtwo, most legendaries are simply guaranteed to join you after you go back and face them once after the credits roll. I say most legendaries because a lot of them are unaccounted for. By getting a hold of the mystery part or the secret slab, you can find other legendaries which are recruited the exact same way as the first game.
New to Explorers of Sky is Spinda's Cafe, which you use to trade unwanted items. Sounds cool, but a lot of the times you just don't end up getting any good drops. You're better off just buying a lotto ticket and seeing what you get. It's also how you get an exclusive dungeon which features Shaman. Again, nothing special, but it's a neat extra. This game actually had some events which you could use to recruit Pokemon like Mew. Normally we'd say that since Nintendo Wi-Fi is no longer a thing, that they can't be accessed. However, thanks to Wondermail, this feature has been saved. It's pretty cool to see stuff like this get preserved, especially when we're at risk of losing some of these things thanks to the nearing digital-only age.
If we could say anything bad about this game, a lot of the dungeons lack their own identity. You could certainly argue the same for the first game as well, but I think it's more of an issue here. The first game had stuff like underground caverns, a sky tower, underwater trenches, ancient ruins.
Explorers of Sky in comparison has a lot of forest and cave-based dungeons. Maybe this was intentional, to remind the player about what it is they're fighting for. It could also be a side effect of this game being much longer than the first. Make no mistake, this game will have you going on for quite a while.
The other problem is the combat. I still love being able to take advantage of the grid by using ranged attacks like Flamethrower. The actual combat itself, however, is still fairly stilted, as just like last game, you can only set one move at a time. Equally, after dealing with so many monster houses, I feel that the speed of combat should be sped up just a tad.
As for presentation, Explorers of Sky keeps the sprite-based visuals from the first game. Every Pokemon has their own character portrait now, which is a very nice touch. The more detailed images of the different environments like the Ruined Future really hit home more than just describing what's happened. Some of the sprite work can even look downright amazing, like the Volbeat and Illumai's fountain or when Lapras is swimming across the Sea of Time. As for the music, do we really need to say any more than we've said already? Each song brings a different flavor of emotion to the events that unfold, and not once do they feel out of place or mistimed. On their own, they may not seem like much, but when partnered with the scene that they're tied to, it can make for some powerful shit.
And that was Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. I feel like what I said about the first game applies 20-fold here. This is a game that you experience. Yes, the gameplay is fun, but if you're going to play this game, you need to be in it for the world and its characters. That may turn some of you off, but I assure you that this adventure is not one that should be missed. Next to MGS2, this has my favourite story in any video game, and although the themes might not be as deep, it makes up for that for characters that you come to love by the time the credits roll.
If you're still not satisfied with the story of the main games, then we'll say it again. You owe it to yourself to play this game. It's clear through the extra content in Sky and the general storyline that the writers cared about the world they were creating, and they succeeded by a long shot. With fun gameplay on top of that, I see no reason not to give this game a chance at least once. It's on the Wii U Virtual Console, and a physical copy shouldn't be too hard to track down, so give it a try when you have the chance.
And that ends the review. This video has been in the works for almost a year now, so I really do hope you enjoyed it. Getting to replay this game for the first time in years was such a great feeling. Doubly so with all the new content that I didn't get to see on my first go. Before I bid you adieu, I implore you to check out my friend TCSGaming. He's made a ton of great Pokemon content like top 6 Pokemon generations and top 10 Generation 1 Pokemon. We've even made another video before this discussing Shadow the Hedgehog, so please give that a look when you get the chance. Trey, thank you for joining me, man, and I'm sorry this took so long.
Oh, that's no problem. Now, where's my money?
What?